Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Courtside Soundoff podcast today. I'm Josh Evanoff. He's Angel Ortega. A lot of stuff to talk about. UFC 252, the playoffs, UFC Vegas 7, some NBA, some Bellator, some boxing. Whole lot of stuff to talk about today. Before I get into that, I want to talk about Fight Plus. Fight Plus provides a special selection of preview events for boxing, MMA, pro wrestling, and other combat sports. Watch preview events from over 25 promotions 30 days after airing. Fight Plus includes organizations like Brave FC, Unified MMA, UC MMA, CZW, BKB, FSW, BCB Boxing, Kunlun, and much, much more are available for your viewing pleasure. You can cancel anytime. If you guys want a free Fight Plus 7-day free trial, you can go through our YouTube, our website, our Twitter, anywhere you can find us. You can find the link. Enjoy 7 free days of fighting. If you don't cancel after that, you will be charged. Last Saturday night, the trilogy, Daniel Cormier, Stipe Miocic, coming to a close in Vegas at the UFC Apex. Stipe Miocic retaining his title, ending the trilogy off with a win, ending it 2-1, defeating Cormier via unanimous decision. It was an all-over-the-place fight, all over the place judging. I saw some people thinking DC won. I saw some people saying Stipe won. In the end, the judges would agree with Stipe. We'll get into the controversy of the fight in a second before we talk about that and what the whole controversy was. Andrew, how did you score the fight? Because personally, I saw some people, granted the minority, saying that DC won, but I'm curious how you scored it.
I had it. It was 2-2 going into the 5th round. And I'm so torn because for me it's the criteria which is used, we need to prove upon it. Because I'm like, well, I can score it like this, but it's not necessarily the right way to score it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is a big deal to me. It's like, how valuable is it to clinch up against the cage but not lead to anything? Or do you have to attack a certain, like, how effective do you have to be in the clinch for you to be scored a winning round? Like I said, I had a 2-2 going into that 5th round. I thought the rounds were a lot closer. I will say I was torn. I thought, and I guess I had it in the end for Stipe, but just barely. And it could have swung to DC's way. At the end of the day, I had my reasons for it wanting to swing the other way, and saving the UFC heavyweight weight class. But it ended the way it did. But I was definitely frustrated with the scoring and just how the fight was scored was my big thing. It was a good fight. Credit where credit's due. DC's fucking blind now in an eye. I don't know if that's true, but yeah, that was shitty to see.
Yeah. Well, if you guys don't know, DC, what was it? 3rd or 4th round? I want to say it was the 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
3rd round. And obviously, a whole lot of the controversy going into this trilogy is eye pokes. Both of them, poked each other in the eyes multiple times throughout the first 2 fights. Now, people only got mad about DC doing it because Stipe's a firefighter and one of the most loved UFC fighters. So him poking DC in the eyes twice over 2 fights didn't matter because DC did it 3 times apparently. Anyways, though, DC poked Stipe in the eyes in the first round. It's kind of a light one. It wasn't that big. And then Stipe basically straight up molested DC's brain in the 3rd round. Probably the most vicious eye poke I've seen since Tony Ferguson, Rafael dos Anjos, years ago, which is probably the worst eye poke I've ever seen to date. This one rivals that. It was a terrible one, and DC apparently couldn't see out of his eye for the next 2 rounds. I believe I don't know what the actual, it was like a torn, something in his eye got torn. I don't know exactly what it was. The official diagnosis, I don't remember exactly what it was, but still very, very bad. Personally, I understand what you're talking about with the whole scoring thing, because generally speaking, and this is the thing, right? Judges are incompetent in MMA, and this is one of the things that irritates me, is because if you get a takedown or if you hold someone to the cage and you don't do anything with it, that's not supposed to count. But yet, there were various points of the fight where Stipe would just hold DC up against the cage, and DC wasn't doing anything, and Stipe wasn't doing anything, and that really shouldn't matter. That's not supposed to be scored, but they'd give Stipe the control time, so he'd win that round. Personally, at a fifth, tied going into the 5th round, and they basically just held there and stalled for about 4 minutes of that 5-minute round. And Stipe looked like the one who was doing a little bit more in the clinch, so I had to give him that 5th round. I don't like that that's how it was scored, and but at the same point, DC should have escaped. He should have done something more. And he was defending, but at the same point, Stipe wasn't even trying to do anything with that. Overall, it was an amazing fight. Round 1 I gave to DC. It was a really close round. But DC got the takedown, and he hurt him at the end of the round. So he's a toss-up 2nd round. Stipe hurt DC, took that round. 3rd round, DC was still feeling the effects of the knockdown in the 2nd round, so he got tagged. 4th round, I thought DC outstruck him. 5th round, I just talked about it, very, very, very close, but a whole lot of control time for Stipe. Good win for him, ends the trilogy. And I gotta say this, man, I was super impressed with Stipe in this because it's one thing, right? First fight, DC knocks him out clean. 2nd fight, DC dominates up until the 4th round. All right. This one was mostly, I felt like there was not a moment where Stipe was getting outclassed. He got outclassed for various points throughout the first 2 fights, and maybe you could chalk it up to him having a better game plan, or maybe DC's gotten older. But at the end of the day, he still came in there, and really it was kind of more of a fight where he was dominating DC at various periods of the fight, chalking it up to a whole lot of things. But regardless, super impressed by him. He's going to be fighting Ngannou next, which is going to be, oh my God, that's going to be an amazing fight. First fight was amazing, so I can't wait for that 2nd fight. Moving on to the co-main. If you guys thought that the end of Daniel Cormier's career with being a super, an eye poke, not being able to see, controversial judging was depressing, then maybe you'll like the co-main as well, because Sean O'Malley, one of those promising fighters in the UFC, one of the rising stars, losing the fight after being injured after we don't know exactly what the problem is still as of yet, another injury report in the co-main. But anyways, he hurt his foot, hurt his leg, ended up going down. Marlon Vera jumped on with a few ground and pound strikes, and that was it. What were your thoughts, man? I know I texted you afterwards that was super lame, but it was super depressing too, honestly.
It was something so unmanageable that happened, dude. It was unforeseen, I expected, if anything, maybe a very hard, back and forth fight, maybe Sean trying to find, his opening, having a hard time going in. Not the case, sadly. That injury really messed it up. I really do think that was like the big thing. Because, people fight through injuries and all that, like it happens, you can do it. You don't always necessarily, it's very hard to come out on top, but that one was pretty bad. Hopefully he recovers quick. I'm sure he'll be back, and I'm sure they'll fight again. If there's some animosity there, so there's a story to be told there. So I'm sure we'll see them again soon.
Yeah, and I really thought it was just because that fight was forever long. It lasted 4 minutes or so. And I think Sean was hurt the last minute. The first 3 minutes are pretty entertaining. I thought we got a glimpse of what that fight could have been. Sean was going out there. He was throwing a lot of feints. He was getting Marlon to bite on a couple of those feints. And Marlon, for what it's worth, really, he wasn't – eventually he stopped biting on them, and he started doing a little bit of work. But still, it sucked, man, because I thought that fight was just starting to get good. He hurt his leg. We still don't know how. I saw some people saying, he kicked it. I'm like – man, Marlon Vera kicked his leg once and he got hurt. He actually started getting hurt, like tripping over himself like a minute and a half later. Do you think that kick was just the most delayed reaction of all time? Like that, it's fine that it was an injury. Like he still won. It was still a good win for Marlon Vera. He's going to be moving up in the rankings, so good win for him. But injuries are fine. They happen to MMA. Like we don't have to. We have to be his check, leg check. It was incredible. Him eating that leg kick with his leg. He's such a durable leg. Like that's we don't have to say stuff like that. But it's fine. We need to find a medium to give Marlon Vera props and also acknowledge that it was an injury. Regardless, he'll be back. Hopefully they run that one back at some point. It's clearly a lot of animosity there. So that that'd be a fun one somewhere down the line. And then Jairzinho Rosenstrike defeating Junior Dos Santos. This was an interesting fight. I thought this was a really interesting fight purely for the fact that I thought this is the best JDS looked in a long time. I thought he's doing a lot of good work to the body, I noticed. He was landing with that right hand a fair bit, and I thought he was looking really, really good. I thought he looked faster than he did in the Blades fight. I thought he was evading more punches than he did in the Ngannou fight. Didn't even matter. Jairzinho, he landed clean 2 or 3 times, and that was all he needed, knocking down JDS, getting the finish. Personally, I think this is probably the best win of Jairzinho's career. I mean, honestly, JDS has lost twice in a row before this, but if you look at Jairzinho's career, I mean, he beat Junior Albini, Alan Crowder, Arlovsky in kind of just a really, really quick fight where he clipped him. Overeem in a fight where he lost every single moment until they got the knockout in the 5th round. JDS fight, I thought he looked really, really good. What were your thoughts on Jairzinho's win?
We finally got to see more of his overall skill set. I felt like, all the kickboxing, like all those skills he's developed over the years, didn't impress me as much as I thought it would. But it's still a good job, obviously no hate, no nothing, obviously. He put in the work though. He had taken to the second, but it's a clean, nice win. Rough for JDS, but that's how it goes. Rough because they're teammates,
Yeah, but I mean, I would think I was impressed because I think we both had different opinions of him going in. You know what I mean? Because I was high on Jairzinho, but not that high because of the Overeem fight where Overeem basically outclassed him. And Overeem is top 5 in the world, amazing anyway, one of the greatest of all time. But still, you know what I mean. But this one, I thought he looked really, really good. I thought both of them looked good. They were both landed some really good stuff before getting the knockout. Regardless, good win for him. Just kind of closing out the main card, Daniel Pineda beat Herbert Burns via TKO. Really nice win for him. You talked about how you were not sold on Herbert Burns. I was like, maybe give him a chance. But same point, I was, Daniel Pineda was a really, really experienced guy. Some good wins at PFL before this. Nice streak in Bellator. And then it just showed maybe too much too soon. I mean, Daniel Pineda, he's an older guy. He's a veteran of the game. Herbert Burns clearly had a really bad weight cut, but still nice win for him. And then also Merab defeating John Dodson. Not even going to try and say his name. Merab just defeating John Dodson via unanimous decision. What were your thoughts on those two kind of main card openers?
Yeah, they were good. Like I told you, the Herbert one, I was like, something's off here, and I was right. Something was off, and it did go the way I thought it potentially could have.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much. I mean, I think you picked Herbert anyway, but you were right, man. I mean, straight up good win for Pineda, but man, Herbert Burns, that was really disappointing. He got outclassed. That wasn't even close. Daniel Pineda just beat the shit out of him. So that was really disappointing to see if you're somebody who's high on Herbert Burns. But regardless, was there anything on the undercard you want to talk about?
Nothing particular I wanted to talk about that I enjoyed.
All right, well, I'll do the thing. Vince from Hell Pichel defeating Jim Miller. That was a really, really fun fight. But Vince Pichel defeating Jim Miller should tell you that God does not exist and neither does karma. Verna Jandiroba defeating Felice Herring. Really good win by Verna Jandiroba. I picked her to win. I was not surprised. I told you guys she was one of the greatest jiu-jitsu artists in the UFC. Took her all of a minute to submit Felice Herring though with an armbar. And Felice, she was one of the top strawweights for a while. Now she's lost 3 in a row. Interesting to see where she's gonna go from here. But yeah, closing out, that was a really, really good card, man. Really, really good card. The one this weekend, not as good. There's, the main event, Pedro Munoz, Frankie Edgar. Obviously, Frankie Edgar, former lightweight champion, former, long-time contender featherweight. It's kind of crazy to think about that now he's fighting. Because you think about lightweights now, man. Lightweights now are just absolute monsters. Khabib, Conor, guys who just would tower. Tony Ferguson tower over somebody like Frankie Edgar, who's 5'6", naturally didn't cut any weight, cut barely probably any weight at all to fight at 155, and he was a former champion. He was a dominant guy there. I mean, he beat all of the lightweights from his era. Jim Miller, Spencer Fisher, Hermes Franca, Sean Shirk, BJ Penn, Gray Maynard. And then he lost to Benson, and then he lost to Aldo, and he started going downhill a bit, but then he, picked it up at featherweight, won 5 fights in a row. In my opinion, I think Frankie Edgar's prime was probably 2013 to 2016, beating guys like Chad Mendez, Faber, Swanson, Penn, Oliveira. But then, he's kind of had some rough years, man. I mean, he worked his way into a title shot after beating Yair, gave it up to fight Brian Ortega on short notice. Brian knocked him out. Fought Cub Swanson, really boring fight, but he picked up the win. Got a title shot against Max, got 50-45, got outclassed, and then he got knocked out by Korean Zombie in dominant fashion in December. So we don't really know, and now he's 38 and he's moving down a weight class. I'm not sure if it's the right move for him. We'll have to see. Pedro Munoz, on the other hand, he's kind of a gatekeeper to the top 5 at bantamweight. There's nothing wrong with it. People use gatekeeper in negative connotation. I'm not using it in that way, but his losses are to Sterling, Dodson, Rivera, and Assunção. So basically just the top guys of that division. But also, he has really nice wins in his career as well. I mean, Rob Font, Brett Johns, Brandon Caraway, and then the Garbrandt win, which is the greatest win of his career. A lot of storylines heading into this one. What do you think about this fight, the main event?
Hey man, we got something special here, that's for sure. You know what I mean? For what it's worth, there's a good story coming into it, right? But at the same time, it's like, man, those last couple fights, man, have been suspect. So. Like we were talking about your podcast, obviously we didn't have it on audio. We get to see a lot here,
Particularly with Frankie.
Yeah, particularly with Frankie. And granted, this be a nice little win for Pedro too. You know what I mean? Like there's definitely don't overlook that if it went that way. And the thing is, it's like, as it seems, it's like I feel like. Both of us, and we talked about it prior, right? We really don't have the best case to build on Frankie to win this fight. The one thing we can even argue is that he made the weight class switch to this weight class now, but it's like, is that even a good idea? Because these guys are pretty durable down here. They're pretty explosive. There's a lot of good young blood, a lot of hungry guys. And it's like Pedro. Like you said, has some nice wins in there. I just don't see Frankie doing it. If he does it, good for him. Really unexpected for me. Like you said, he got 50-45. He lost his fight after that. Had a win in there against Cub, but he beat Cub before that. And like we said, Cub hasn't looked the same, and a loss before that. And that one, that wasn't a good loss either. That was a Brian Ortega loss, I think. And it's like, it's really hard to build a good case for him, and it looks and Pedro's looked pretty good. He was on a 3 before his loss, his most recent loss. I mean, it's just it doesn't seem like Frankie should be able to win it or pull it out this time around.
Yeah, and also another thing too is he's moving down a weight class where. I mean, I guess Frankie's kind of an anomaly in this anyway, his last few years, because now Frankie's 38, right? He's going to be 39 in like 2 months. When was the last time you saw anybody who was in their late 30s having any success at bantamweight? The further down you go, no, I'm serious, man. The further down you go, the less success. Oh, what were you going to say?
Oh, it was not bantamweight, but it was be like, well, we do have Manny in boxing,
Oh, that's true. That's true. But like, the further down you go, the less success these older dudes have. Like in heavyweight, we still got Arlovsky floating around there. You know what I mean? Like these older dudes at light heavyweight and heavyweight. Dan Cormier just fought for the title. He's 41. The current heavyweight champ is 38. You know what I mean? So like, but you go down these lighter weight classes, you never see these dudes have success. And Jose Aldo, who's like, we just saw him fight for the bantamweight title. He's 5 years younger than Frankie, and he got tooled by a younger guy. So it's like, Munoz is in his early 30s. I don't think it's going to go well for Frankie. We know Frankie's past his prime. We don't know how far past it he actually is because he doesn't fight that often, and he's been fighting top talent. And I know you're in agreement here. I mean, I got Munoz, and I think it's probably going to be bad. Like, I know a lot of people are still, I mean, we're both not very high on Frankie anymore. That's probably part of it. But, I mean, are you kind of on the same page?
Oh yeah, 110%.
So, yeah, we both got Munoz. Like, it's just, I mean, it's rough, man. Not only is it rough making your debut, like, in a weight class, but also you're much, much older. I mean, Jose Aldo, it took him time to adjust. I mean, in bantamweight, he looked really good. He still lost the fight. You know, he lost his bantamweight debut as well, and now Frankie's older. He's taken a lot of damage in the last few fights. I don't think it's going to be good, man. Pedro Munoz is not a knockout guy, but I could see him getting a knockout, especially because Frankie's draining his body down. And then the co-main event. It's weird that this is the co-main event because, you know, sometimes you have some stacked fights. Like, we're going to talk about the pay-per-view card next month. Pay-per-view is different than a fight night, but still stacked co-main. You know what I mean? And then, like, we've had some stacked co-mains over the last few weeks. Alonzo Menafield, you know, very highly rated prospect. You know, he's 32, but still he started MMA pretty late, but he's extremely explosive. Ovin St. Preux, long-time contender at light heavyweight, one of the greatest. I wanted to call him one of the greatest light heavyweights of all time, but one of the most entertaining, bare minimum. And they're fighting on the co-main. You know, that's something. The original co-main was Uriah Hall taking on Yoel Romero, so we lost that. But regardless, this is going to be a fight for sure. No, but jokes aside, OSP, longtime contender, beating some of the greatest guys in this division: Corey Anderson, Tyson Pedro, Patrick Cummins, Shogun, Krylov. He's beaten a lot of dudes over the years, man. He's a super durable guy, great submission skills, competent on the feet as well. Hard to deal with southpaw. Alonzo Menafield, 9-1, did lose his last fight, but he looked good in that one too, even though he lost. And he's extremely powerful. All of his wins, all of his wins are actually by finish. Only one of them is not, by the way, a knockout, which was a submission, and that was a submission to punches. So that dude tapped out. So interesting fight here. I know that you said before we got on the show that you think this could actually be lopsided in the side of OSP. So I'm kind of curious. What do you make of this fight overall?
You know, I always feel like when you have these guys who have, like, you know, 20 to, you know, in this case 38 fights to 10 fights, I feel like you got to think about it. There has to be a level of, like, I always take experience, man. Like, fighting is experience. Like, you can never take that away. You can never take away, you know, 38, minutes of war. You know, not 38 minutes of war. 38, fights. You know, of that from OSP, all the situations, all the, everything he's been put through, to the 10 fights Alonzo has, and then, obviously the well-roundedness of OSP. That just makes me think that could possibly, but like I said, it's not impossible for a guy, coming in with, not a crazy record, and, and pretty quick wins, because we've seen this happen before, where you have a guy who comes to the UFC, racks up, some pretty quick wins, be a knockout, then fights like a very experienced guy, and gets, outclassed just because they just don't have that well-roundedness, that full experience, and it's just because the guy is so seasoned, it's like he's just not going to go down like that. That's what really makes me want to, or that's what's making me choose OSP over Alonzo.
Yeah, and I can understand that. OSP, he's been around in the game for a long time. He's a much more known commodity. He's been like one of the top contenders for a long time, and he was really, really close to a title shot not that long ago as well. I mean, it doesn't feel that long ago, but it was actually in 2017, so never mind. He beat Yushin Okami, Marcos Rogerio de Lima, and then Corey Anderson. And then if he beat Ilir Latifi, he would have gotten that title shot, just missed out on it. But he beat Tyson Pedro. But then his last 4 fights lead me to believe maybe he's past his best. I mean, he is in his, I want to say late 30s now. He's 37. And, Dominic Reyes, no shame in losing to Dominic Reyes. Let me be clear. Dominic Reyes, the current light heavyweight champion, beat up on OSP. That should have been a knockout. If there was a weird fight, he knocked him down at the last 3 seconds. The fight got waved off, and then the bell rang, and they made it go to a decision anyway. Pretty strange. But then, Dominic Reyes beat him up. Krylov beat him up and then submitted him. And Nikita Krylov is not a jiu-jitsu guy, by the way. And then Oliachuk beat him up on the feet, nearly finished him. And then he got a Von Flue out of nowhere, which is, that's OSP to a T, but still. And then, he lost to Ben Rothwell, and he looked really, really sloppy, and he just, he probably could have won that fight if he just used a little bit more pressure, but he didn't. Alonzo Menafield, he's a really powerful guy. He clearly has some issues in terms of stamina. I don't care. I'm going to take Alonzo Menafield. It's the upset. He's not known that much. The former football player. I'm going to take him, man. I think he's going to finish at OSP. It's my bold prediction. But I think he's going to do it as long as he does not get gassed out trying to go for a finish, which, to be fair, is very likely. The OSP has gas problems, so whatever. Fuck it. Is there anything on the undercard that you want to talk about? Because I know, let's be honest, there's not a whole lot here.
There isn't. Please, take over.
Yeah, I'll take over. And you guys know me. I'm very much the MMA purist over here. I talk about the under the radar fights, the bangers that not a whole lot of people talk about. I got nothing. So let's move on to there is actually a little bit here. Only a couple fights I want to highlight, though. Maria Agapova taking on Shayna Dobson. Maria Agapova, I told you guys when she made her debut, 2 or 3 months ago, that she's the real deal. She's one of my, I see a lot of potential in this girl. She reminds me a lot of a young Joanna, honestly, young Jacek. She's 9-1. She made her debut. She beat the hell out of Hannah Cifers. She's good submission skills. She's dangerous on the feet. Her one loss is to Tracy Cortez, who's also in the UFC and is very, highly rated prospect in her own right. She's in her early 20s. She's 23, and she's taking on Shayna Dobson, this should be a gimme fight for Agapova. I don't want to say any fight's a gimme fight, but this should be a really, really, it seems like a showcase fight for her. Dobson's 3-4. She has good power, but that's about it. And she does have a win over Nico Montano, but at the same point, she's lost 3 in a row. So this should be a nice win for Agapova. Even if she loses, keep your eyes on her. This girl has a lot of potential. She's still in her early 20s. That should be an absolute banger right there. All right. And then also, opening up the main card is Dana Rodriguez versus Takashi Sato. Rodriguez, pretty good guy at welterweight. I want to say he made his debut not that long ago. I know he's a young kid. He's 12-1. He's taking on Sato, who, I want to say he's 2-1 in the UFC, but he's been around. He was, former Pancrase contender. I want to see he fought for the title. I don't think he won it. But he's had some interesting fights. He's had some fun fights in the UFC. I'll say that. Beat up on Ben Saunders, lost in a really close fight to Bilal Muhammad, ended up being submitted to the third round, and then he knocked out Jason Witt, 2 months ago. So that one should be a really, really fun one. It's not going to be the most high-level fight, but it's going to be a fun fight nonetheless. So that's kind of, moving on from predictions and moving on to MMA news. If we could take, let's just go with this one. John Jones vacated his UFC Light Heavyweight Championship. We'll get into the fight that's going to be made for the title in a minute. But since we just talked about UFC 252 and we talked about, the fact that Stipe is going to be fighting Ngannou, what fight makes sense for John moving on up to heavyweight? Because, Stipe is going to be out for a while, and Ngannou's going to get that title shot next. I don't think Jones is going to wait around on the shelf for a while. Dana White even said they're going to have 4 or 5 heavyweights who they can match him up with. What fight at heavyweight do you think makes sense for John?
And I think be like a good test for him, or the one that makes the most sense?
Both.
That's hard, because like I said, dude, 8 through 1 are all killers at heavyweight. We talked about this not too long ago, off air. I'm like, and even then the people trying to make their way up the rankings are like dangerous in and of themselves. Man, it just kind of depends on what they want to throw their way, because it could just throw, rank 15, Blagoy Ivanov his way, coming off a loss. Or I don't know if he had a fight I don't know if he had a fight recently, but last time I remember he lost.
Yeah.
But if they wanted to get into it really quick and push him hard, I don't know if you'd be a big fan of this. I don't even know if I'm 100% sold it, but a Volkov fight.
That fight would be a banger. That would be that's an amazing fight. but I don't think John would take it. I don't think Volkov's a big enough name. He's coming off a loss. And I also think that Volkov very well might beat John if that fight happens.
Yeah, and the thing is, a lot of the other ones don't make any sense for me either, you know? Because Reem's about to fight. I don't think they try to set up Reem with him anytime soon. I mean, Derek, maybe, but it's like, why would Derek do it, you know? Doesn't make any sense. I feel like that'd be a very boring fight. I feel like John would just try to outpoint him. And then Blades, I don't think that would happen in Ghana. It doesn't make any sense for that to happen, because Ngannou should be fighting for the belt next. So it's a weird spot, because like I told you, unless they want to give him someone who's just clearly like not the best at heavyweight, you know, but like just enough to be ranking. Like I said, like Blagoy, I mean that's probably like the only option, and then they're gonna push him really hard, or unless they just push him hard off the bat, which I don't know what they want to do.
Yeah, and honestly, there's not a whole lot that's I could see John taking. Like, it's like, okay, so John is a huge star in the top 5 for biggest stars in the UFC. He can't fight for, and I mean, Dana doubled down. I thought, if anything, they'd just say, fucking Ngannou, they're going to give Stipe, Jones next. He doubled down on it in another interview like yesterday, that it's going to be Ngannou next. So, I mean, you look at it right now at heavyweight, Jones has to fight somebody with a big name, and they also have to be a contender, right? And Ngannou's fighting Stipe. Blades is fighting Lewis. DC just retired. Jairzinho is open, but he's not a big name. JDS has lost 3 in a row. And then Overeem will be fighting Sakai. There's a couple of fights. I thought, if anything, that Lewis would make a lot of sense, because that's a really winnable fight for John, and he's a big name. I think, if anything, I could see them making Overeem. I could see them doing an Overeem fight. If Overeem beats Sakai, Overeem's a really, really big name. They could sell it as a pay-per-view. You know what I mean? Like, I think that one makes a lot of sense. Maybe a JDS too, because JDS is a big. It's just a problem. It has to make sense contender-wise and name-wise. JDS has lost 3 in a row, but he's still ranked 7. So I mean, it's interesting. It's definitely a problem for them that they're gonna have to figure out. But then my outside shot, which I don't think is gonna happen, but I'd love to see it happen. Brock Lesnar. I think that Brock fight would make a lot of sense. But, Brock still said, he did an interview like a year ago where he said he still wants that fight. And Jones called him out after UFC 214, and then he popped for steroids, so it never ended up happening. So I don't know. We'll have to see.
And good luck to UFC on this one.
Yeah. But also, with Jones relinquishing the belt, a fight got made. Dom Reyes versus Jan Wachowicz for the light heavyweight belt at UFC 253. What are your thoughts on that matchup?
Dude, it's great. It's what it should be. There's nothing that's wrong with that fight, in my opinion, at all. I think that's literally the only thing they could have done, and it's the best thing they've done.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really good fight. And here's the thing: it's like earlier in the week, the fight got made, and we didn't know the stakes of it. Because Jones had not been, he hadn't given up the belt yet. It's going to be weird, and I really want to talk about this because it's going to be so weird, this fight. It's going to be an awesome fight. Let me be clear about this. Jan and Reyes, to me, are the 2 best light heavyweights outside of Jones. Maybe you could throw in Thiago in there, maybe. But, this is going to be the first time in almost a decade that somebody not named John Jones or Daniel Cormier will hold the belt. So that one's going to be strange. But it is the right matchup, I agree. And then the last thing, Anderson Silva versus Uriah Hall is official for potentially Anderson Silva's last fight or his second to last fight. Is this the right matchup? Because we saw Uriah, he was originally going to fight Yoel. He's going to originally fight Jacare. Now he's taking on Anderson Silva, one of the greatest of all time. Anderson wanted a big money fight. He wanted a super fight. He's not going to get it. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
It's not bad, but you got to think about it is, as far as Uriah is not far from contention. He's still very live. Done some has, done pretty good fights. Hurt Paulo Costa, who's now fighting for the title. Put him in a scary spot there for a bit. We have to take into account that, and I would have loved like a Cowboy, Silva fight. I thought that would have been fun if they could have made that happen somehow.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
I thought that would have been really entertaining. Not what we're getting, but for what it's worth, Uriah's had 2 opponent changes now. Well, 2 total, yeah. So and he's been ready. He was ready to fight on Fight Island. He was ready to fight on the island, man. He was ready to fight first. What was it? First card back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was living in his gym. He was super focused. He's committed. If anything, this really sucks for him because both the matchups he had were pretty ideal for his situation.
Yeah.
And now he gets Anderson Silva, which is like in any other, if we went back a couple of years, prior to the injury, this would be like, oh wow, be crazy. It'd be great. But instead, we're getting a, older, and it's just not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same at all.
Yeah. I mean, I still like the fight a lot, but at the same point, it's a little bit, it's almost a little bit depressing in a way that Anderson's not going to give that big fight that he really, really wanted. At the same point, still, it's a great fight, stylistically, because this is a fight that was originally made a long time ago at UFC 198. It never ended up happening. Because Anderson had to have gallbladder surgery, and then, he ended up stepping in against DC on short notice, which was a whole thing years ago, which is insane to think about. That was 4 years ago, because it seems like yesterday. UFC 200, what a batshit crazy card. But anyways, yeah, I mean, I like the fight stylistically. I think it's going to be a really fun one, but it's almost, I don't know. It's hard to make for Anderson Silva, because he's such a legend, and we don't know how good he is, honestly. We don't really know how good he is anymore. And he's kind of in a similar situation to Frankie, because he doesn't fight that often, and his fights have been weird. His fights have been so strange. I mean, ever since losing the belt, he broke his leg against Weidman. He beat Nick Diaz and then tested positive. He lost to Bisping in an extremely weird fight that you can argue he won, and then he stepped in on 3 days' notice to fight DC. He beat Brunson in a fight that most people thought he lost. And then he fought Izzy in a really, really close fight, but it was almost it looked like an exhibition because neither one was taking it that seriously. And then he messed up his leg against Cannonier. So, we have it's so weird. You know what I mean? That Derek Brunson win is aged very, very nicely, though. So, shout out Anderson for that one.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so that's something good. But, yeah, I mean, we can move on to the NBA now. The first game, for game 1 for all the series is now wrapped. And in case you guys are wondering, as of this recording, because by the time we upload this, a couple more games will be played, and I believe all games will be 2 games in. But, as of right now, Portland's up, Houston's up, Miami's up a game, Orlando shocked the world, won a game, and then also Utah took game 1. Denver took game 1, excuse me. Toronto took game 1, Boston took game 1, and then the Clippers also took game 1. So there's a lot to make out of these games, and despite the fact that we're only 1 game in. What are your early playoff thoughts about virtually any series? Just throw a series out there. Tell us your thoughts.
I mean, look, as far as start, Jazz would have thought would happen. Nuggets would win. Don showed up really early on. Did not matter at all. He scored almost 60 points in the playoffs. First player in I don't know how many years to score, I think over 50 plus points or whatever in the playoffs since I think it was like probably I think I saw it was like Tracy McGrady, Michael Jordan, and then another player. And I think it might have been Karl Malone. It didn't matter. He still lost. Absolutely sucks for him. That Jazz team is just. I mean, they're not bad, but They're not going to be able to do it. It really sucks as they've made it to the playoffs, after his arrival, performed pretty well, but it's like they haven't been able to take that next step, and it's just really tough for them. I mean, granted, the Nuggets had a great series, shot great from the field, shot great from three, did pretty good for the free throw line. But I mean, it's just like another Utah Jazz year. They're just not gonna make it very far. They made it to the playoffs. Maybe they'll put some interesting games up, but they just won't be able to pull through it. And they got a pretty hard matchup in the Nuggets, and the team that I think is like the one that could come out of the West and no one would expect necessarily. Or not people are actively thinking about it.
Yeah, and I'm kind of on the same page with them kind of being a team that could potentially upset a few teams and make it out of the West, because all the talk has been about the Lakers and the Clippers. And personally, I mean, we can get into the Lakers in a minute, but I haven't been that impressed with them for a lot of this season. I mean, I never really thought, and especially now, because their shooters are struggling badly. Their guards, they have had a massive guard issue this entire season. So we'll have to see. But then, I would not be surprised about them coming out of the West. But yeah, that was an amazing game. But Donovan Mitchell going off and then having the game of his life and them still losing by 10, that's really worrisome, man. That has to be super worrisome if you're a Utah fan. Other serious thoughts, Philadelphia just missing it. Like, that game with Boston was a lot closer than the score. They lost by 8. The score looks, not like that game was super close. But let's get to the most controversial game, Dallas and LA. Dallas was winning early, actually LA was winning early, and then Dallas went on a 48-18 run to kind of get the lead going into halftime. A little bit before that, Kristaps Porzingis got ejected for a fight which he wasn't even involved in. I believe he got shoved, and then he shoved somebody back, and he got ejected, and they went on to lose this game by 8, and he was winning. They were winning during the time he was in. I've heard it was one of the worst ejections in a long time. What were your thoughts on it? And the thoughts on kind of it affecting such a huge game with such a huge situation.
I didn't get to personally see. I saw a clip of it. I didn't know the whole context to it but from what I hear from everybody, I mean, literally everybody. I was watching a Twitch stream. Someone talked about it. I saw it on Twitter's, and everybody who I've asked about it, they're like, "Yep, complete and utter bullshit. Shouldn't have gotten ejected." And who knows how that affects the outcome of the game, right? At the end of the day, I can say, Porzingis being in the game would make a difference, and I believe it would, but who knows, right? Me saying it doesn't mean it's reality. It ended 110, 118. Porzingis wasn't in the game, and he probably would have made a difference. I'm sure he would have. Who knows how the game ends? Granted, on that Clippers team, who guards, Porzingis? Does anybody even try to,
Yeah.
He's one of those few guys in the league that's kind of hard. It was like, what do you even do against him, Even though Porzingis isn't necessarily top 4 or top 5 guy in the league, even though he's really good, his skill set is really good and really unique to him. You don't necessarily think of him in that top 5, maybe not even that top 10 type position, but it's crazy to think that guy's that good and he's not in that talk. But like I said, from what I hear, it sucks. Is he gonna be out next game? Is he gonna be able to come back and play next game?
I believe he's gonna be back.
Okay, that's good. So we'll see. We'll see what happens next time around, but who knows how that could affect the series going forward. But we also talked about the Mavericks being a live dog, like one of those teams that compete any team on a good night, and they showed that. I mean, Porzingis got ejected, and the game still ended 110, 118. And I'm sure the Mavericks still did a good job and were able to hold in, and I'm sure the Clippers just pulled away at the end there.
Yeah. But it was a really close game, but man, I can't help but wonder. And a series like this that is super close, and the Mavericks struggle with the Clippers all year long. So them winning this first game would do such big things for their confidence, for the morale of this team, for them to even just take a game would be huge this early on. And then for them to pretty much be robbed of that opportunity was really, really pissed me off, I gotta be honest with you. And it was probably one of the worst ejections I've seen in a long time. regardless, that was a huge talking point. The other big talking point of these first few games, Orlando and Portland. Now this is the big thing. Orlando basically stomped Milwaukee. Like let's be honest here. There was not a single point Milwaukee led in the game, and they were losing the entire time, which is part of it. They were losing the entire time. Not only that, but then they cut the lead in the third, near the end of the third. They got it within 1 or 2, and then Orlando went on a huge run and ended up winning the game by double digits, by winning by 12. Which was impressive, incredible win. Most people thought they were going to get stomped. We thought they were going to get stomped. Apparently, Game 1 Orlando is unstoppable. And then Portland stealing Game 1 from LA. Very close game down the stretch. Portland ended up pulling away late. What were your thoughts on, them, the underdog, the 8 seed, stealing both Game 1s? First time that's happened in 17 years.
17 years. That's crazy. Surprisingly, in the grand scheme of things, that isn't very long ago,
Yeah.
But nevertheless, very unexpected. The Bucks one hasn't even more surprised anything. The Trailblazers one, I like I said, I thought the Lakers are very touchable. Trailblazers are also, like I said, in their live dog, still capable of pulling out. From what I've heard, it was a terrible shooting night for the Lakers, and then from what I saw statistically, I think we looked at it, it was a bad shooting night. It looked bad at the start, then they started pulling through a little bit more, but just weren't able to take that, pedal to the metal and put in that extra bit that would have just propelled them forward. Who knows what happens in the next game? But I think the Bucks will rally back and make up for it. Maybe they were coming into it a little too confident, a little too loose. As for the Lakers, though, different story. There is some worries there. Kuzma didn't go off as expected. He didn't do. I don't think he did bad. Just talking points and stats wise. I don't have all the shooting stats in front of me, but it's a matter of maybe the other guys on the team, the other role players, having their shine and doing their part, because. Clearly, AD, LeBron, and Kuz aren't going to be it for this team.
Yeah. I got to be honest. Do you think there's any I can get into my thoughts actually in a second. Do you think there's any potential for a series upset in either one of these?
Like I told you, if it was anything, it'd be the Portland Lakers one. I think the Bucks rally back. There's just no way the Bucks can possibly mess this up. It just doesn't make any sense why they would. Yeah,
that's kind of my thoughts on it. I got to be honest. I'm kind of showing a bit of my hand here because we don't, we did it last year too, and we're going to do it this year. We give predictions series by series rather than giving an overview of who we think is going to make it. But I'm kind of showing a bit of my hand here. I don't think the Bucks make it to the finals, and part of that is because I think they're super inconsistent. We've seen it throughout the season. We saw it in the playoffs last year, and we're seeing it in the playoffs this year. Losing any game to a Magic squad they're not that good. I hate they made the playoffs by virtue of the East being terrible. And yet they somehow managed to be worse than a Nets squad, which we're missing 9 people from their original starting roster at the start of the year. So, and a lot of those guys got signed during the break, so they are somehow worse than that Nets squad. Regardless. Them losing any game at all to the Magic is bad, and also they got straight up bodied during Game 1. It wasn't that close. They lost the entire time. They started to get a bit competitive in the third, but even then they got stomped in the fourth, so it didn't matter. But yeah, I don't think they're going to lose a series. I think best case scenario goes probably 6. You know what I mean? Best case scenario for the Magic, they win another game. Best case scenario. I think there's not much of a chance for an upset. Blazers, on the other hand, I could totally see the Blazers getting the upset right. I could see them getting it. I don't think they're going to. If anything, I think it's more likely for this to be an Iverson sweep, a.k.a. Dame going off Game 1, losing the next 4 games. I think that's more likely than an actual series win for the Blazers. I could see them winning, though, by virtue of McCollum and Lillard are – even McCollum, who's struggling and has an injury, and Lillard, who's dying right now after having to do all that he's been able to do and being forced to do because Portland's not a very great roster, and he doesn't have a whole lot of help around him. He's playing like 40 minutes a game. They're still loads better than the LA guards. Like, it's not even a competition. Like, Caruso's a funny meme. I like KCP. I mean, I like JR. But they are significantly worse than what Portland's putting out there on the guard side of things. So Lillard and McCollum are going to eat all game. And if LeBron and AD, who have been inconsistent as of late, if they don't pick it up, I could see them losing the series. I don't think they're going to, but I could see it potentially happen. So, which, that's what a lot of people are saying, man. They say, like, I saw Charles Barkley talking about it, that, like, hypothetically, if Portland gets out to a fast start, they can steal this series. Just because it's going to take LA time. And we said during the restart, just by virtue of how their roster is, it's going to take them time to get hot. If they don't get hot soon, they're going to lose that series. So we'll have to see what happens and all that. More playoff games today, more playoff games the day after that. It's going to be awesome. Overall, the bubble playoffs working out way better than I thought anybody else, than anybody thought they really would. They've been a lot of fun. Moving on to boxing, finally, some big boxing matches, and two relatively well-known stars in Dillian Whyte and Shawn Porter and Povetkin to a lesser extent, all fighting on the same weekend. That's insane to me. I never thought that we'd have this again, because boxing, unlike MMA, we've ranted about it before, but they're taking the more cautious approach of waiting till fans come back. But not our boys over at Matchroom. Matchroom and Eddie Hearn, they got a main event going on in his backyard. Dillian Whyte, the what is his actual? He's the interim heavyweight champ for the WBC.
He's something.
He's the WBC Diamond Champion.
Same.
Taking on Povetkin, Alexander Povetkin. The dude's longevity at this point. He's been around for so long. He was one of the top heavyweights during the Klitschko age. I want to say he was actually a former WBC champion as well. WBA, excuse me. He's fought against the likes of Joshua, Klitschko. He has wins over Hasim Rahman, Carlos Takam, David Price, Huey Fury. He has a lot of really good wins over the years, taking on Dillian Whyte, who, the dark horse in the division, really. I mean, he has one loss in his career, and it was to AJ. And he's been on an absolute tear ever since losing it. I think losing to AJ was the best thing for him. I mean, honestly, because before that, he's a bit more reckless, and he's still reckless now. And I thought, especially last time out against Maurice Walk on the undercard of the AJ Ruiz rematch, I thought he looked really, really sloppy. But still, I think he's looked better ever since that loss. I mean, he beat David Allen, Chisel Roa twice, Lucas Brown, Joseph Parker, Oscar Rivas. He's looked extremely impressive as of late. I know that we're kind of on the same wavelength in our predictions, but I'll let you go first on what you think's going to happen on Saturday.
Look, man, they both had lacking performances. I completely forgot about Dillian Whyte being on that same undercard, dude, against his opposition. They both kind of had lacking performances against their opponent. I felt, shout out to Michael Hunter. Michael Hunter, having a great performance against Povetkin. I feel like that was Michael Hunter's big first opponent, and a really hard one at that. So, he took it to a draw, great by him. And Dillian Whyte went the distance against Maurice Walk. That man could eat, though, dude. That man was in there. He was bringing it too. I mean, he knew that was his opportunity, and he tried his best. But even with Povetkin's experience, I think his age showed in that Michael Hunter fight. I think Dillian Whyte's going to take this one.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I think, Dillian, he's the younger guy. At this point, he's probably the more powerful guy. Povetkin neither got finished, and actually, I thought it took him. He looked good down the stretch, but early in that fight, he was getting tooled by the faster guy, by the younger guy, and now he's almost 41. He said his days are numbered pretty much. And I'm going to take Dillian Whyte. I think it's going to be a knockout too. I mean, Povetkin's a super durable guy, but I think his last great hurrah was the fight against AJ. That's honestly what I believe. I thought that was his last really, really good performance. He still lost, BTKO, but he looked good early on in that one. And then he had the Huey Fury fight, which not a whole lot happened, and then the Hunter draw, which was a banger of a fight, but someone of Michael Hunter's stature and ability, I think Povetkin of his prime would have beaten him. So it's whatever, but it should still be a good fight regardless. So that one's gonna be a really, really fun one. And then the other big boxing fight happened this weekend. Shawn Porter, who last time we saw him, the fight of the year, arguably, against Errol Spence, split decision, just missing out on the title at welterweight last September, taking on Sebastian Formiela, former IBO welterweight champ, taking on Porter for the WBC silver title. A lot of WBC silver belts are going out around this weekend, boys. Yeah, I mean, who do you got in this one, man?
I didn't get to Sebastian's fight, but Sebastian hasn't built like a big enough portfolio from what I see. He did as world champ, did win the title, but he's fighting a guy who is very tough, fought some of the best competition, not afraid to fight anybody. It's gonna be a hard fight for him. We'll have to see. I really want to watch it because I want to see what Sebastian's made of. And who knows, if Sebastian wins this is a big win for him. Guy who was just fighting Errol Spence, took Errol Spence distance, could have became WBC IBF champion, and beat maybe what's considered pound for pound best at welterweight. There's a good story going into that. If Sebastian pulls it out, this could make for an interesting storyline in that weight class. But Shawn Porter does it. He's right back up there. Beat a guy who just had the title not long ago, and he's like, shows that he's still there for big fights, and he wants to get back into that title shot position.
Yeah, he's trying to get back into that title shot position, and I mean, like you said, he's a guy who's been around for a while, and he's fought the best of the best, and he's not afraid of anybody. Beat the likes of Devin Alexander, Paulie Malignaggi, Broner, Danny Garcia, Andre Berto, and he's really only lost to the top of the top: Kell Brook, Keith Thurman, and then Spence. And Formiela is kind of the exact opposite in that. He's really hasn't fought the best of the best at all. He's fought outside of Germany once, and that was in Sweden. He's fought in one guy with a Wikipedia page. And he's a former IBO welterweight champion, but he's not that experienced. He's 33. He's fought one person with a Wikipedia page, so on and so forth. And I don't know a whole lot about Sebastian. I watched highlights before the show, not gonna lie. But I don't know. I think this is gonna be a good one for Porter. I got a lot of faith in him. Honestly, the Spence fight, I didn't know. Honestly, I got to be honest. I thought Errol Spence was gonna tool him. Instead, he showed a lot of fire in that. He showed he was super competitive. He showed that he still has a lot left for this division. And I'm gonna pick Shawn Porter. He's the more proven guy. He's the more experienced guy. This should be a really, really good fight, though. I think it's going to be a really, really fun one. We can see what Formiela is made of and see, if Shawn Porter is still – I mean, that was an absolute war. He's getting older in age. So we'll see if he still has the kind of potential and the fire to be a top guy in that division. But is there anything else before you close out?
Nothing specifically I want to call out, except that tomorrow is the NBA Draft Lottery. So keep an eye out for that.
Ooh, I did not even know that. So shout out to you for telling me.
So yeah.
You guys for listening as always. Courtside Soundoff. Been having a lot of success on YouTube as of late, and also across Spotify as well. So shout out to you guys for that. Thanks for listening as always. Courtside Soundoff available on Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, TuneIn. Anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us. If you guys want to find our social media, at Courtside Sound 1 on Twitter. It's where we're most active. Also Facebook and Instagram, but we don't really use those. And I'm at Josh Evanoff. He's at _01. Thank you guys for listening as always. So peace and butt grease. Mouse click.